Our next speaker will be Dr. Naveen Visweswaraiah, who is an associate professor at VYASA, India, and co-principal investigator, ICMR. He will be discussing the psychophysiology of meditation on the syllable Om. In this presentation, the studies on meditation on a syllable Om will be detailed to show how Om can be termed as a state of alertful rest.
Good afternoon to all. This is a kind of a very comprehensive overview of what we've been doing for over 15 years. Much of this work was started by Dr. Shirley Tellis, with whom all of you are very familiar, while she was in MHANS pursuing her MPhil PhD, and then I pursued my doctorate work also on psychophysiology of meditation, particularly on Om. And then we have Center for Advanced Research from Indian Council of Medical Research, kind of a contemporary body of NIH here, also funds us to do the research on meditation in syllable Om. So it's kind of like some. I think I should come first. So this is about 20, close to 20 odd papers summarized, and try and do it in 15 minutes. And it's good to have question and answers, so I choose to skip quite a few slides. Bear with me. This is an overview. These are the headings under which I thought I'd speak. First 2-3 subheadings are important for those of you who are not so familiar with this. First 3 slides, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the basics of yoga. For just those of you who are not familiar, particularly in this part of the world, much of the derived yoga practices that are available, which are specific to different schools, are body-based, and there are a big range of schools, gurus even from India, who focus only on breath-based practices, and some straight away talk of meditation directly with no body breath preparatory activities, and of course people talk of soul or spirit-based activities. Ashtanga Yoga really goes along this sequence from gross to subtle, and I don't see any new age or derived yoga school which follows this classical prescription. Again, these are the 2 fundamental concepts for us to understand where we actually fit in meditation. The concept of Panchakosha was mentioned by Dr. Nagendraji this morning. And the interesting thing is, yoga gives us techniques to cater or to harness each of these koshas. Talking of syllable Om, this is mentioned in Mandukya Upanishad, one of the classical texts. And these are the 3 letters used or syllable used and forms Om. And like this morning, somebody was asking about the Sanskrit chants used in Kirtan Kriya. This is the significance of Om in its subsets and together. Now, for those of us, if you want to define meditation, to me, these 2 are very, very important, and sort of mentioning it here. One, of course, it's a state of reasoning, reflection, bliss, and pure sense of being. So that is in essence what meditation is. And what is interesting for us as researchers, it's a state where there is a simultaneous reduction of distractions. What was mentioned this morning as a default mode network or resting state, or what we call random thinking, and to a state of enhanced focused awareness, not focused thinking. Now, if you have to really illustrate this into subsets, 2 of these states are mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, and 2 of these are mentioned in Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Chanchalata is a state of random thinking, where we have disjointed thoughts, and Ekagrata, focusing, that we are all familiar with, scholastic focusing or any learning experience. Dharana is a meditative focusing, and dhyana is meditative defocusing. Now, what I would like to mention here, while describing these states, these are the points that we need to consider. Direction of thoughts, randomness to ekagrata, then it gets unidirectional. Number of thoughts remain until here, then it starts to reduce drastically. Intensity shown here and the thickness of the arrows. So you kind of being aware of, and here we are more participatory in nature. And intermittent state of no thought. If you were to have this arrow continuously, number of them over a period of time, there's this periods in between this single thought, which is supposedly the silence. Now, there are a number of meditation techniques available today from different cultures and civilizations. Each of this model will help us. In fact, it did help us while classifying meditation techniques that we wanted to study. Most of them fall in between these two phases, sub-phases. There are dharana type of meditation and dhyana type of meditation. And there is a review by contemporary psychologists today, what they call focused attention and open monitoring. Could be parallel to what is this states prescribed in Patanjali, etc. For those of you who are interested, I just thought I'd put this. Very clear, lucid description of what these four states are. Chanchalata and Ekagrata, and of course dharana and dhyana. So I would get into it later on if you have time. Key features of Om meditation, particularly since we are talking about it. Going by that classification, this is a dhyana type of meditation. Although it's a continuum, the act of meditation is a continuum from Chanchalata to dhyana, but the end state, as we call, in this case is dhyana, not dharana. There are meditation techniques where we refer to again as focused attention, would stop at dharana, no, not in dhyana. So in that classification, I would rather put this as open monitoring. So there is a defocusing component as an end state, which is again one of the important features to know. And there is a distinct dharana phase. In this case, unlike other techniques, either some of them go directly to the focusing state or stop at focusing state. Here you do have a dharana when you chant Om meditation or to get into Om meditation, where there is a dharana component with loud chanting and then the mental chanting, which takes you to the dhyana phase. And then recognition and experience of single thought as Om per se, and then of course the emphasis is on intermittent no thought state. Now, methods of investigation, we virtually used large number of variables and domains of variables. But what I would like to highlight here is aspects of the study. Most of you are familiar with meditation literature would know that all of these or some of these always used. Traditionally autonomic and respiratory variables, and then EEG were used, and in later years ego potential is now, in the last 10 years, neuroimaging. And of course subjective experience is very important to correlate the findings from all of this. As I said, aspects of study, these are some of the key features that we need to consider. Changes across states of meditation is this is the first time that we had an opportunity to split a state of wakeful consciousness into meditative state and non-meditative state. And we have two sub-states after that. And then of course typically this is the design that everyone uses. But what we started to use to reduce confounding variables is self as control. That's the best for meditation research that we have found out in these 2 decades. Control studies, of course, you have meditators and non-meditators. There's a whole lot of issues related to confounding variables between the two groups, but would be very, very different. Changes across repeat sessions. Now, this is something that we look for because this is a distinct state of consciousness, and we want to see consistent repeat changes which are consistent across sessions. Then, impact of experience. A whole lot of studies traditionally looked at experienced meditators and off late. People are looking at naive meditators. And this is a very tricky, and I don't think we still have a very conclusive answer. Meditation is such a subjective act. We really don't have an objective marker to really define that somebody's, they're sitting closed eyes, are they really having a strategy of a negative connotation or a meditative connotation. Now, but nevertheless, there are attempts to look at markers of act of meditation. The first one came in 1984. published in Somatic Medicine from TM group, where these are the some different subjects superimposed. You have the breath suspension of the control group here, and this is the of the meditators. So they saw of the 11 subjects, where when there's an advanced program called TM Siddhi program, where people are asked to have this soul consciousness as I described for meditation on syllable Om, as an intermittent period of silence. And this was correlated with the sustained breath suspension, and this was statistically significant. So that was a marker that they interpreted as a no-thought state. In 1992, well before we really established laboratory in VYASA, Dr. Shirley, with her mentor in Nimhans, had this trace taken, where people were supposedly capable of having a single thought and no thought state. And this is how the respiratory traces look. And of course, this is similar to what TM found much earlier. Now, what we have found, we have studied at least 3 types of meditation techniques, that is meditation on syllable Om and Brahma Kumari's Raja Yoga meditation, which is more like focused attention on set of thoughts about the content of meditation, and then of course something which is like mindfulness in India called Vipassana meditation. Now across these 3, we did find consistent markers for Om and Brahma Kumaris in terms of heart rate and respiratory rate changes. Heart rate incidentally in Brahma Kumaris increases during meditation because, as I said, it's more a state of focused attention and there is mental engagement during, and then of course the post state is a lot more relaxing. Whereas in meditation on Om, talking of Om, we have a decrease in heart rate and respiratory rate. Now this is something that we had to look inter-subject and intra-subject. When you repeat the same meditator many times, does it repeat? And can you really see the similar changes in heart rate and respiratory rate? And when you have across different sub-meditators, do you really find this range of reduction? The answer is yes. Now let's look at the changes in these 2 subsections. Changes related to the end state. We simply ask somebody to meditate on syllable Om, and we compare that either with non-meditation session of the same subject, or compared it with pre or post of the state of that session. And the other one is the phases of meditation, like I described earlier, across 4 states: Chanchalata, Ekagrita, Dhyana. We would see that in 3 subsets, a bunch of studies into each one of them. Meditation on Om alone, where we just had meditators meditating on syllable Om, and we did not have any control session. And then here, after relaxation, response was a lot more prevalent and available. The results were available to us. We used one as control, and then we looked at experienced and naive. Quickly, since we have running short of time, so to use next 5 minutes, meditation alone, this is similar to TM, Robert Keith Wallace study, where it was a state of hyper-arousal, whereas, look at, skipping that, now, this is some of the graphs of autonomic variables, where you see the changes across meditation on Om, and on One, and non-targeted thinking, which is random thinking. Now there's not much changes here, whereas when you see heart rate, there's a reduction during, and breath rate seems to reduce more when somebody is chanting One. So there is a classical relaxation can happen regardless of the content of meditation, or the content of the word that we repeat, but the conscious drive of relaxation happens with the awareness of the content of the mantra or the content of meditation. And of course, now unlike Wallace study, where there is a unilateral changes, here we had seen selective changes, where some of the components of autonomic variables, or autonomic and respiratory variables, would show a sign of activation. So here you see reduction in skin resistance, which means a thread of enhanced awareness. So as you see here, there are 4 markers, and you see one of it, which is kind of in isolation would be referred as a sign of arousal, whereas in conjunction with these 3, then you would want to interpret it as a state of alertful rest, as opposed to a blanket statement of a state of hypoarousal. Now, what did we find? We didn't look at autonomic variables here. I would like to ask you to focus here. These are the amplitudes of the waves, which each one corresponds to different parts of the brain along the sensory tract. This is the naive, and this is the experienced. So the amplitude denotes the number of neurons recruited. So the amplitude of change, the magnitude of change in the same area, part of the brain, is more significant across time period with experience. So now, very briefly, probably in 3 minutes, phases of meditation. Now, we were talking of dharana and dhyana type. Now, if dhyana, as we saw in earlier slides, a state of alertful rest. So you see, when compared to Brahma Kumaris, all the changes you see in Om right here. Whereas for Brahma Kumaris, you see at the dharana. So even if you instruct them, orient them to the phase for dhyana, you really don't see much changes, which is classically known across studies for Brahma Kumaris. So similarly, this is a passing phase here. You see all the changes here. So it's also useful for us to categorize the kind of meditation, and then there are implications on training. Again, evoke potential similar. So all the changes is at the end state in dhyana, and again for Brahma Kumaris it's at dharana, conspicuously not even a single marker changing here in both. So that shows that we did have good meditators complying to the traditional prescription of what those meditations were. As we said earlier, Chanchalata, Ekagrata, Dharana, Dhyana. Again, in this case we are talking of meditation on syllable Om. So all the changes were seen here in the phase of dhyana as opposed to the other 3. Meditation, we saw the brain stem across the neural axis, mid latency, and then there's long latency. So this is to look at the brain stem changes, the thalamic changes, primary cortex, and the association phase. So what did we see? So let me go to the summary slide. So you have, this is in terms of time taken for a sensory input or a stimulus to be transmitted across the sensory tract. So the less time taken for until the primary auditory cortex. The secondary or association cortex and beyond, there is a delayed response. Probably this can be correlated with the other studies that we've been seeing, and where we've started to see inhibition, cortical inhibition. We have the results of fMRI scans when people are switching across these 4 states, like we had the 4 states in the morning with Kit and Kriya. So here we have those 4 classical states of wakeful consciousness, and we see in dharana the substrates which are traditionally known in meditation research for selective attention. And in dhyana, this is something very interesting. We are really in the process of counter-checking with multiple research groups, where we see subcortical white matter activation. Now that is interpreted as when there is an adjoining gray matter inhibition is there, then you see the activation of white matter. So that means this supports our electrophysiological observation of cortical inhibition. Now, so it's the same thing. Now, in summary, so what is meditation on cerebral Om? Can be understood or defined as a state of alertful rest, not a state of hypo-arousal, which is a dhyana type of meditation, not by content, it's not focused attention. Of course, we have more enhanced and accurate by virtue of the time taken and the number of neurons recruited for, in this case, auditory sensory perception. And we had a number of cognitive tasks given to these meditators on judgment and planning, which are higher brain functions attributed to frontal lobe. And those enhanced by improved task performance. And now we are doing that while people are in the scanner and simultaneously recording high density EEG of about 128 channels. So now we will know unlike all of these studies which are done in baseline, just in meditation per se, now we will have these meditators performing these cognitive tasks, and we would have their fMRI, which is, and then electrophysiology, EEG data together, and that will be interesting. Probably in the next meeting we'll have those results. Some of the popular mentioned here. Now this is something very interesting. I thought someone here. There's also an acknowledgement. All the entire lab is supported by this funding agency of Government of India. Now we have these cognitive tasks in these meditators. It's being supported by Department of Science and Technology. Government of India has 5-year blocks. The first heavily funded information technology, then nanotechnology, then biotechnology. Interestingly, now cognitive neuroscience, which is why probably there's some funding for looking at depression and dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, so on and so forth. So it's a good time for us to do good quality meditation. This is our team for surely tell us heads these 2 major grants. End with this quote: while in the midst of daily life, Sadhguru echoed the same thing, yet detached. So that's the highest order of meditation, or karma yoga. With the practice of yoga, one can ever live in blissful happiness. So we really don't have to sit per se for a meditation. We can convert our way through consciousness.